Alright, well, good afternoon. My name is Cameron Nixon, and welcome back to the discussion. Today is Wednesday, March 18th, 2020. I know I am not keeping track of what day it is. And, to be honest, I want to break out of my typical peppy facade and just hope you're doing alright and hope you're taking care of yourself. These are some uncertain times we're in, but I hope you're being mindful of and selective of what energies you're taking in during the day and limiting your exposure to those that are going to be negative for you, and really seeking out and pursuing those that keep you positive and keep you fulfilled. And this is that for me, right? This is what keeps me sane, and if it does that for you, then that also makes me happy. I also want to encourage you to check out my last discussion that was on the night before the Nashville and Cookeville surprise intense tornadoes. That was quite an interesting discussion and a challenging one. And so I guess I implore you to watch that. But let's take a look at what's going on today. So what have we got? Definite drawing your attention to this area in the southwest U.S. We've got this is a really interesting large scale kind of mid-level circulation with this powerful jet streak. It's kind of pivoting around, like almost like Fujiwara-ing, but pivoting around that. And once that kind of slingshots its way as a strong negatively tilted trough into the western plains, that is going to overspread the southern plains in this nice, little more westerly upper level flow. Really not that amplified. And what that's also going to do is enforce a strong and rapid low-level mass response. You can see this low-level jet picks up rather quickly during the evening hours, and that is going to really push a shear environment from 0 to 60 quite quickly. And we've currently got some pretty open Gulf moisture with 60s dews overspreading much of the area already right now. So we are currently primed for this event later on. And I guess I should bring you out of model world and take a look at what our current satellite is showing. And, you don't have to even pull up a map of 3 Cape to see that there's a lot of cumulus around here. This is all kind of highlighting an area of high low-level instability and decent lapse rates. You're getting that convective overturning, you're getting that instability and these enhanced cumulus growth. There was an outflow boundary laid out earlier today, and you can kind of see the remnants of that just south of the DFW metro area, kind of curling around up here. There's some remnant showers here. That is not going to be a direct player, though it could kind of limit or halt the northward movement of some of this air mass. But what are going to be our players today? We'll have to take a closer look at that because there's a lot of uncertainty as to where we're going to get these storms to initiate. But I guess the take home for this is that there is a pretty well-defined region of the most favorable ingredients. I could hover over. This is what a 3-kilometer cape looks like. And again, this is one of the most important ingredients for tornado formation, if any of the hazards. As this basically tells you where the lowest levels are unstable enough to promote strong stretching of any vortex. And as you can see, this is actually a pretty confined area around especially north central Texas into North Texas into perhaps even the eastern panhandle later tonight. So this should limit our spatial extent for where tornadoes are possible, but that obviously doesn't say anything about wind or hail. So let's see what we got going on. Our surface presentation, as this whole system comes through, we will have Lee cyclogenesis. It's just a thing that happens. And I kind of forgot about this, but I want to also draw your attention to this really strong. This is our cold core low, going toward the Baja into southern Arizona. That will also present an interesting little cold core tornado setup. But I don't want to get carried away with that. But yeah, I want to draw your attention to just generally this open Gulf, very nonchalant surface pattern, if you will. Just this nice moisture return, and continuing into the evening hours, that pressure gradient will tighten. Perhaps some more vigorous influx of moisture into this area as well. So moisture will not be an issue. I know the NAM likes to cap its surroundings with some pretty some cooling in the low levels associated with extensive cloud cover. I'm not sure we're going to have that today, so I guess I'm hedging more toward the RAPS presentation of the low-level instability profiles. So what we could take a look at is some CAPE. What I want to point your attention to here is that a lot of kind of what we saw earlier with that 3 CAPE map, a lot of your best instability is going to be kind of around the rolling plains region here, from Lubbock into Abilene up to McLean, potentially more northward as this kind of energy shifts north through the evening. And so this is again going to be this kind of bubble here is most classically favored for really robust supercells and a tornado threat. But we do have to take into account shear. There are a few regimes that could present themselves, a few targets, I guess, that I have. The first one is this sneaky little thing down here by Del Rio, and that is formed as we have upslope flow increasing throughout the day. You can see these wind vectors start to cyclonically curve around this area, and that will bring in some pretty decent shear where you have the southeasterly flow below a pretty strong mid-level flow. And this is the kind of hodograph that results from that. I guess I should step it out. Yeah, it's about 0.1Z, put it around 0Z. But you have some areas that are more than sufficient for supercell growth. You have very strong mid-level shear, kind of weaker low-level shear, and this is definitely a large hail kind of hodograph and sounding pretty thick CAPE in the mid-levels. So definitely expecting hail could be a threat down there. Anywhere else, I know the threat has slowly been kind of shifting out of the Permian Basin over the last few days, but I would guess a damaging wind threat is still possible as we have this kind of inverted V sort of sounding. I know West Texas loves to kind of just like throw out convection in these kind of regimes. You get this just muddied, cloudy mess. And any of this convection going through the Permian Basin tonight and then overnight could yield some pretty strong damaging wind gusts. So hail threat, damaging wind gusts. Focus more on the, I guess, more obvious target for today for me would be this area, this highly juiced area with the low-level CAPE. So we could check out what our shear profiles will be like for that. Let's try a 22Z kind of later in the afternoon. We still have these really long hodographs in the mid-levels, which are good for initial supercell organization. And again, you have this really bottom-heavy thermodynamic profiles, which are essentially supportive of tornadoes from the start, though you can get some pretty large hail from this, especially early on before supercells shift into tornado mode. Around 0Z, we could take a sounding around this area, and you could see that the hodograph is gradually enlarging. Still got that really good low thermodynamics, but certainly a supercellular supportive hodograph. with the chance of tornadoes by around 0Z. And as this picks up, again, I will remind you that our low-level jet really starts ramping up after 0Z. Contour is up to over 40 knots. So that will definitely make for those classic sickle-shaped photographs. I can pluck one kind of between Abilene and Dallas. Yeah, so pretty large looping photographs. These are, I really like this sort of shear profile for supercells. I like to call it like the robust supercell photograph. Because not only do we have a really high amount of low-level streamwise vorticity, we also have a lot of shear, cyclonically curving shear in the mid-levels, and that is very good for maintaining just classic, steadily cyclic supercells, such as those. This is actually a very similar photograph that which sculpted the Dora, New Mexico tornado in May of last year. Just a very slow, deliberate cycling, and very strong pressure perturbations as well, for tornado potential, even into worsening low-level thermodynamic profiles. I'm not sure that's going to be a big deal tonight. So, where are we going to initiate today? That is going to be the issue. I want to first point out this area as well into McLean. Sorry, before we go on. This is also really heavy on the low-level cape, as we saw earlier from this RAP analysis that kind of shifts up there overnight. Although our shear is a little bit worse until, especially probably once you kick into the overnight hours, where that low-level jet has the chance to get up there. But you have a little bit more wonkiness I've seen. But with all that low-level cape, I'm assuming there is a chance of tornadoes up into the eastern panhandle through McLean. So sorry about the little interjection, but where are we going to initiate? That is going to be the issue. So I would definitely not put it past this upsloping region near Del Rio to initiate. That's basically a given. Del Rio always does this thing, and you just got to let it and watch it happen. I also think there will be some kind of initiation out west here, because if we take a look at low-level lapse rates, these approach some pretty high values, dry adiabatic, into the late afternoon, and with all that convective overturning, that deep mixed boundary layer, you're probably going to get some sort of initiation there. And as it rides into the moist sector, you could have some problems as storms start to organize. But they may take their time to become supercells and might not do so as easily because they're being birthed in this weaker thermodynamic environment and weaker shear. And so that leaves us to, why is the HRRR, if you've been watching, really focused and trained in on this one or two supercells moving from Abilene to Dallas? I really want to discourage people from just taking the HRRR for what it's worth and saying, okay, this is going to happen. But I believe you can do that if you figure out the source of that characteristic. And I want to point you to, this is a little uplift kind of along the Caprock region, the southern Caprock region. As you move off of Big Spring, there is a little plateau area near Nolan and Maryneal. I don't even know if that's the right pronunciation, but we'll go with that. And what this is just high enough elevation. I have seen events that if we're looking for this diffuse forcing like we have today, that do pop near here. I don't think the HRRR is out to lunch with this, but I just want you to know or have some confidence as to why the HRRR is doing its thing. I do believe this is a pretty viable option for initiation. I also think the typical Caprock magic area near Matador and Turkey and Silverton, I'm losing my voice, sorry about that. I also believe that is a pretty viable option as well later this evening as we get even stronger moisture return as that low-level cape works its way up here. So what this target will do, if the stronger forcing doesn't get here in time to make everything a line, I think any chance for discrete convection might come from here and work its way up toward Shamrock and Arnott, up into Woodward later tonight. This is probably after 9-10 p.m. But this is definitely a viable option for discrete, which may bear with it a tornado threat as well as damaging wind. But you're probably most interested in this more obvious target that the Storm Prediction Center has hatched at 10%. Any supercell or any storm forming off this little plateau, let's remind ourselves, let's go to around 22Z. This seems like a pretty telling time of the initiation environment. And if we could get some loading to go on. Again, we have this really long hodograph, supportive of pretty rapid evolution into supercells, even though there's not much 0 to 3 shear, which is what I look for particularly robust supercells. That will occur later. But there's no cap, there's no detriments in the thermal profile, so growth should be rather quick with this. So by that timeline, if a storm does initiate off this, it will probably pretty quickly become supercellular once it moves into near Abilene, and definitely pose a large hail threat. So especially if you're spotting, let's go through this. As it moves east of Abilene, it will kind of venture into these boonies and probably pick up strength rather quickly as we approach the 0Z hour. And you can see that our low level thermal profile stays the same and our hodograph enlarges. And as we cruise a little bit further in time, we are going to be flirting. Again, this is assuming a supercell does move off this plateau region, which is what I like to call a very high probability scenario because this is a terrain feature. It will flirt with the Dallas-Fort Worth area. I'm not sure with current storm motions that it will allow a direct impact to Fort Worth. I think that's pretty low probability. But as we move closer to the metro, we will again see these very augmented hodograph shapes that are capable of all hazard types, including strong tornadoes. Perhaps RAP and NAM definitely differ in their thermal profiles, but perhaps intense tornadoes with this kind of sounding. And again, these are going to be fairly steadily cyclic. I could expect at least a couple tornadoes with a single supercell over the course of a couple hours. So definitely an interesting threat today, and it's pretty. If this solution were to come to verify, this is some pretty, again, high probability forecasting, right? You just take this mountain range and take storm motion away from this and see what we got. See our communities that are in this threat. But again, we do have some pretty lower probability scenarios, including this one up here, along the classic Cap Rock, and then down by Del Rio. We'll just have to see what happens there. So thank you guys for watching, and I am interested to see how today unfolds. Have a great afternoon.